This is Ed from Miami. I had posted this lesson before, and I found out that towards the end of the video it was defective, so I apologize for that. So here I am doing it again and hope this is going to help you. What I want to show you today is I want to talk about the diatonic scale. I think the diatonic scale is very important to learn because all of the music theory, or most of our music theory, really derives from the major scale. I want to tell you up front that I am not a music theory expert by far. I have never taken a formal music theory class. I have learned what I know about this on social media and on the internet, and it really has helped me a lot to take my guitar playing to the next level. And I hope that what I pass on to you, this information to you, is going to be helpful for you also. So what I want to teach you today is the diatonic scale. And the reason that it's so important to know the diatonic scale is because it's going to help you to figure out the keys of the songs. It's going to help you to figure out which chord progressions go well with each other. It's going to, if you're into music writing, if you want to write your own music, this is going to help you immensely. And another area that this is really going to help you is in soloing. If you want to get into soloing, even if you just know one pattern of the major scale, you would be able to play over a backing track, or you will be able to get together with another musician and just have fun, which is really, this is what it's all about. So we got a lot to cover, so let's get into it. The first thing that we need to know, though, you want to make sure that you know the notes on all your 6 strings. I know that's very basic, and most of you probably know that, but it's something that you really need to know. So you need to know E, A, you need to know D, G, you need to know B and E, okay? That's very, very important for you to know that. So looking at the notes and wanting to know the notes on the fretboard really helps you immensely. But what's really important for you to know for what I'm about to teach you, it's specifically the notes on the 6th string. So the way that you can learn those notes is by knowing the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale in music contains all of the pitches in music. In music, there are 12 notes, 12 pitches, comprised of 7 prime notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it starts all over again on the octave of A. And the accidentals, which are flats and sharps. Today we're just going to be concentrating on the sharps, even though I will be touching on some of the flats also. In the chromatic scale, every single note, every single prime note gets a sharp except for 2 of them, the B and the E. Just think about let it be, like the word be. And it makes it easy for you to remember that in the chromatic scale, every single note gets a sharp except for those 2, B and E. So how do we take that chromatic scale, which contains all of the pitches in music, and we apply it to a fretboard? Well, we know that this is the low E. Okay, so in the chromatic scale, the next note after E, we know that E is one of the notes that doesn't get a sharp. So right next to it, we're going to F. Then we're going to F sharp. We're going to G. We're going into G sharp, A sharp, B, C, because B does not get a sharp, C sharp, D, D sharp, and the octave of E. So that is the chromatic scale. And the chromatic scale, you can basically, obviously apply it everywhere in your fretboard. So if you know that this is C, we know that the chromatic scale tells us that the next note is C sharp, D, D sharp, E, and so on, okay? So as long as you know the notes on your open strings, you can go ahead and use the chromatic scale to find any note on your fretboard. Now, there's the concept of half step and whole step. And the way that that concept is applied to our fretboard is the concept of a half step is represented on our fretboard by the movement of 1 fret. So when you go from F to F sharp, you just move to half step. When you go from G to G sharp, you're moving a half step. When you're going from B to C, it's a half step, and so on. Now, there's also the concept of a whole step, and that is represented on our fretboard by the movement of 2 frets. So when you go from F to G, that's a whole step. When you go from G to A, that's a whole step. From A to B is a whole step. Now, we know that from B to C is a half step, so a whole step would be from B to C sharp, okay? So recapping, we have the chromatic scale, which has all the pitches in music, and that is that every note in the chromatic scale gets a sharp except for 2 of them, B and E. We also have the concept of half steps and whole step, which is represented on a fretboard by the movement of 1 fret for half a step and 2 frets for a whole step, okay? If we look at the chromatic scale is made up of all half steps. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, and back to the octave A. The chromatic scale contains all half steps, okay? Now, there's also flats, and we need to know about flats, okay? When I hear F or F sharp, G or G sharp, when you sharpen the note, in the way I look at it in my mind is that the note is raised in the tone. From F to F sharp, you're raising it half a step. From G to G sharp, you're raising it half a step. When I think of a flat note, okay, I always think of a flat tire. It flattens the tone of the note. In other words, it lowers the tone. So look at this, F to F sharp, then you have G, but if you flatten G, half a tone, or you flatten G, it's the same note as F sharp, and that's called an enharmonic. When you have F sharp and G flat, it's the same note. Look at this, A sharp, we know this is B. When you flatten B, B flat is the same thing as A sharp. G sharp, A flat. So, sharps, the way I look at it, they move towards the bridge on your guitar, F to F sharp, G to G sharp, and flats move towards the headstock, which is A flat, G flat, okay? So recapping, we have the chromatic scale that has all the pitches in music, which contains all half steps, which are represented in your fretboard by the movement of 1 fret, and the concept of whole step is represented by the movement of 2 frets. We have sharps and flats, which are the same note, okay? F sharp is the same as G flat, A sharp is the same as B flat, and those are called enharmonics, okay? Now, jumping into the diatonic scale, the major scale, okay? The do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti scale. The diatonic scale is composed, is structured with whole steps and half steps, okay? And what's so great about this, that it applies to all keys. Every single major scale, regardless of the key you're in, is structured the same way, and that is as follows. The diatonic scale is structure of all whole steps except from 3 to 4 and 7 to 8. So if you want to look at it this way, it's whole step, half step, whole step, half step. That is the structure of a diatonic scale. Now, how do we take that and we apply it to the fretboard, okay? Because to me, as a musician, as a guitar player, music theory, the concepts of music theory is very important, but to me, I need to apply it to make me a better guitar player, okay? So we're going to go ahead and apply now the structure of a diatonic scale to our fretboard using the structure of whole step, half step, whole step, half step, okay? We're going to start with the key of C, and the reason we're doing that is because the key of C in music is the simplest and the cleanest of keys. It does not contain any accidentals. It does not have any sharps or flat. It is made up of all prime notes, okay? So we're going to find the note C on the 6th string. How do we do that? Well, we use the chromatic scale. A lot of you may know that the note C is on the 8th fret, okay? But if you don't know that, you can use the chromatic scale to find it. How do we do that? E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, and here we go. C is right here, okay? Now we're going to apply the structure of the chromatic scale, which we know is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And I know I'm repeating myself on that, but that's very important for you to understand. So if we go to the C, the first movement that we have is a whole step. How is that represented on our fretboard? By 2 frets. And that's D. We need another whole step, which is 2 frets. E. Now we need a half step, right? Well, we can go to F right here, but let's use all of our strings, okay? And I can tell you that this note here, this note here is F, okay? So we go D to E whole step, D to E whole, C to D, C to D whole step, D to E whole step. Now we need a half step, E to F half step. We need a whole step now, F to G whole step. We need another whole and then the half step, which is the octave. So let's take a look at that again, because I want to make sure that you get that concept really, really well in your mind, okay? So we're going to do the major scale, the diatonic scale in the key of C, by doing the exact and following the structure of the whole step, half step. So here we go. C to D is a whole step, D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step, then we need F to G, a whole step, G to A, a whole step, A to B, a whole step, and B to C, the octave, is a half step, okay? And if we look at the pattern, okay, we can see that it goes from the fret 8 to 10, 10 to 12 on the E string, on the A string does the same thing, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and on the D string it goes from 9 to 10, okay? So that's the pattern you gotta go, 10 to 12, I'm sorry, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and 9 to 10, okay? And the guitar being a shape or a pattern-oriented instrument, okay? Because chords, what are chords? A chord is a shape. This is an A minor chord. We all know that. You may know the notes in that A minor chord. You may not know them, but you know that that's an A minor chord because you learned the shape. A D, the same thing. G, the C. Those are shapes. You may not know the notes, but you know the shape. Well, the same thing with the diatonic scale that I just showed you. If you know the shape, now you can find any note on your sixth string by using the chromatic scale, and you just move that pattern to that note, and you play it, and now you're playing that scale on that key. For example, you want to do the G major scale, move it down to G, and we know this is G because the chromatic scale tells us it is. So now play the same pattern. Now you want to do the A major scale. Look for A on your sixth string, and we know that this is A because the chromatic scale tells us it is. You want to do it in F? And you may not even know the notes on the scale. And actually, I think you should know them. You should use the chromatic scale to help you learn them. But you don't have to, as long as you know the pattern and you just move it to whatever note is on your sixth string, and you can play the diatonic scale. Now, you can do that anywhere on your fretboard. For example, we know this is B, right? Using the chromatic scale, we know the next note after B is C. Well, let's apply the structure of the diatonic scale of whole steps and half step. Whole step, whole step. We can use all the strings. We could have done this, but half step, whole step, whole step, and you just play the major diatonic scale in the key of C on your fretboard, and you don't even know the notes. As long as you apply the pattern, as long as you apply the structure of the diatonic scale, you can play the diatonic scale anywhere on your fretboard. Now, the next step that we want to go to is, I want to let you know that each and every diatonic scale, each and every major scale, there are relative chords to that scale, okay? And those chords are the chords that are by the name of the first note on the scales. For example, in the key of C, okay, we know that the first note on that diatonic scale is C. The next note is D. The next note is E. The next note is F. Then the next note is G. A, B, and we're back to C. Well, that diatonic scale produces 7 chords relative to the name of each of those notes. And just as the diatonic scale had a structure of whole step and half step, each chord that is generated by a diatonic scale also has a structure, and that is as follows. The first, the fourth, and the fifth chord produced by a diatonic scale are always major from here to the end of time, and that is a very long time. The second, third, and sixth chord produced by a major diatonic scale are minor. And the seventh is a diminished chord. Now, I don't remember the last time I played a diminished chord. And if you want to get into the diminished chord, more power to you. You can look it up in the internet. The diminished chord really is not played a lot. So I am not going to bother with the diminished chord. You should be aware of it. But the most important chords are the first 6 chords generated by the major scale, okay? And as I stated before, the quality of those chords are always 1, 4, and 5 are major. Second, third, and 6 are always minor. So let's look at that in the key of C. The first note produced in the key of C is what? C, right? Therefore, the relative chord is C. And since the first one in the major scale is always major, it's a C major. What is the second chord in the key of C in the diatonic scale? D, right? C, D. Whole step, remember? The second chord is always minor, all right? So the second chord is a D minor chord. The third chord would be E, right? You got C, D, E. The third chord is always minor also. What is the fourth chord generated by the diatonic scale in the key of C? It's F, right? C, D, E, F. The fourth chord is always major. What is the fifth chord generated by the diatonic scale in the key of C? G, C, D, E, F, G. The fifth chord is always major. What is the sixth chord generated by the diatonic scale in the key of C? It's A, right? C, D, E, F, G, A. And the sixth chord is always minor. So recapping, every major scale, every diatonic scale produces 7 chords relative to those notes in the scale. The first, fourth, and fifth chord that are generated are always major. The second, third, and sixth are always minor, and you have the diminished chord. In the key of C, we have C as the first chord. We have D as the second chord. D minor as the second chord. E minor. We have F as the fourth chord. It's major. G is always major, which is the fifth chord. And then A minor as the sixth chord. Now, we can move that anywhere on the fretboard. Again, we started in the key of C, but now let's go to the key of G. I can tell you right off the bat that the key of G has 1 sharp, okay? And that is, if you follow the pattern, look, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, okay? So, what are the chords that are generated by the key of G in the diatonic major scale? First chord is G, right? And the first chord is always major. What is the second chord that is generated by the diatonic scale in the key of G? A, and the second chord is always minor. The third chord, B, and it's always minor. The fourth chord, C, and it's always major. The fifth chord is D, and it's always major. The sixth chord is E, and it's always minor. And the diminished would be F sharp diminished, okay? Now, how is this going to help you as a guitar player? Well, let's say someone says to you, such and such song is in the key of C. By knowing this information, by knowing that the key of C produces 7 chords relative to that key, and the first, the fourth, and fifth chord are always major, and the second, third, and sixth are always minor, and the seventh is diminished, when someone says such and such song is in the key of C, you automatically think, well, I will most likely encounter a C chord. I will most likely encounter a D minor chord, an E minor, an F major, a G major, or an A minor. Now, will the song use all 7 chords? No. Will the song use maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4? Can you go outside of these chords? Of course, it's music. As long as it sounds good, you can do it. But looking at it from a logistic music theory point of view, you most likely will encounter those chords. So imagine how is that going to help you to learn that song better and more and faster. Also, let's say that you hear a chord progression, or somebody you're reading some sheet somewhere, and it has the chords D minor, it has an E minor, it has an A minor, it has an F. You can think and say, wait a minute, those chords fit into the key of C. That's going to help you mentally in really understanding that song and learning that song a lot faster. Now, how is this also going to help you in other areas? Well, let's say that you want to get into writing your own music. And you say, well, the key of C fits my vocal range perfectly, or I just like the key of C because it's a very simple and clean key. I want to compose my song in the key of C. Well, by knowing this, by knowing that the key of C has generated 7 chords, the first, fourth, and fifth being major, and the second, third, and sixth being minor, then you can write your song by using those chords, and it's going to sound great. Let's say that you want to open the verse kind of on a sad side because it's a love song and you want it to sound a little bit sad. Well, what are the minor chords in the key of C? We know that the second, third, and sixth chord are always minor. And in the key of C, those are the D minor, E minor, and A minor. So what do? You start your verse with an A minor. And you go right into an E minor. Now you wanna write your chorus a little bit happier. Well, what are the major keys? Oh, I'm sorry, what are the major chords in the key of C? Go right into C. Through F. And then you go back to the verse being sad again. That's going to help you immensely in writing your own music. You're going to be able to put a song together that fits your vocal range and that all the chords work, and it's going to sound great. Now you can move that to the key of G. Let's say you want to go ahead and write your song in the key of G. Well, you know the chords in the key of G, right? Because the first, fourth, and fifth are major, the second, third, and sixth are minor, and then that seventh diminished. So what do? Okay, well, I want to write, again, I want to do my my verse kind of on the sad side. What are the minor chords in the key of G? We know that the A minor, right, is the second chord in the key of G. What's the third chord? B minor. So you can write the verse using those minor chords, and then when your chorus comes around, or when your bridge to the song comes around, and you want to make it happy, you go right into the major chords, which are G, C, and then back to the. And you can write a great song that is going to sound great because you're using all the chords, you're sticking to all the notes and all the chords that are produced by the Diatonic Scale. Another area that this is going to be incredibly helpful to you, which it was to me, even if you just know this, even if you just know this pattern, in any key in G, even if you just know that first pattern on the major diatonic scale. Well, let's say you want to do soloing over a backing track. Or let's say you get together with another musician, okay? Let's say a backing track. And you go and you put a backing track, which is C major backing track. Okay. And the backing track is using, let's say, and they're just using that, okay? Well, you can come over here because now you know the diatonic scale in the key of C, and you can start soloing. And it's going to sound great, even if you just know that one. By sticking to those notes over the chords that are being played, that are in C major, that soloing, your soloing is going to sound great. Why? Because that scale that you're using generated all those chords, and they all fit perfectly fine. Let's say that you get together with another musician, and the musician goes to you, let's do this in the key of C. We're going to do a 1-4-5 chord progression. And again, he's going. na 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 na. And it's going to sound fantastic. Why? Again, because you're sticking to the major scale, you're soloing over the chord progression that it's over the chords that are generated by that scale. So it's going to sound great, even if you just know that first shape. Now, can you expand on that? Of course. For example, I'm just going to show you this, and you can look into this later on. But expanding a little bit on the C major scale, the diatonic scale. See, now the pattern just expanded, and it's all about the structure of whole step, half step. So you can figure it out. You can figure by using all your strings, by using the structure of whole step and half step on the diatonic scale, you can expand the shapes and you can expand the patterns in all of the keys, okay? So recapping all this, because I know this is a lot, but just keep it simple, keep it, do it by sections, and you'll get this down. The first thing is the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale gives us all 12 pitches in music, and that is that a chromatic scale are all half steps, and a half step is represented in our fretboard by the movement of 1 fret, and the whole step is represented by the movement of 2 frets, okay? So you can use the chromatic scale in order for you to find the name of all your notes. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, and so on, okay? The concept of half step and whole step, which is what the diatonic scale is structure, okay? We know the diatonic scale is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So when you find a note on your fretboard and you follow that structure, you are going to be building that key, that diatonic scale, okay? For example, if we do G, by starting in G and using the whole step, half step, then you just build the diatonic scale in the key of G, okay? We know that every diatonic scale, every major scale produces 7 relative chords. And those chords, the tonality, the quality of those chords are as follows. The first chord, the 4th and the 5th are always major. The 2nd, 3rd, and 6th are always minor. And the 7 is diminished. And how you can use this? By figuring out a key of a song, by writing your own music and sticking to those chords that are generated by the scale, and also by soloing. Soloing, when you hear a backing track or a musician playing certain chord progression, when you know the key, you can go ahead and solo over those, and it's going to sound great, okay? I hope this information really is going to help you. This is just the beginning. You can explore this a lot more out in social media. It really helped me out, and I hope that it does help you out. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, if you have any criticism, go ahead and put them out there and put it on the comments, and I'll address it, okay? But I hope you got something out of this, and keep rocking, and take care. We'll see you next time.